Okay, good evening. This Zoom session is a little bit different in that we had a recording problem on the initial program on September the 15th. Our guest speaker is William Waithe, and his topic is Towards a Prototype, 26 Years on the CN Western Subdivision Layout. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Willie to begin his presentation.
Sharing is not turned on. I'll send a request. Send a request to share.
Should have it.
Okay, now. Okay. I'm trying to find out how to enlarge. Okay. Is
Yeah.
okay, let me just good. Okay. Is the screen okay now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. And I will be speaking, as Malcolm said, about an approach to the prototype. And in the prototype, this is my opinion of a prototype, is not necessarily exactitude, not having the exact dimensions of a door or a window or the right position of a headlight on a locomotive, but rather a prototype dealing with operations. That is an approach to operating a layout and having a layout that is built in such a way that it looks more like the real thing. Of course, there are some great, and I have seen some great freelance layouts, and this is just a matter of opinion and my preference. So I'll be talking about uh, how I first got started in prototype modeling and how I've adapted over time the present layout to be a bit more prototypical, and what I've learned about the prototypes over the years, over the 26 years. So I'll be talking briefly about the layout, describing the layout. I won't go too much into the technical details because I've covered that before. Then we will look at the rail-served industries on the Weston sub. I'll talk a bit about that subdivision. And last, about how we operate and how we try to approach operating like the rail thing. This is a shot of the Weston sub. Sorry. Okay. And the Western Sub is just a 12-mile section. This section from Hal West up to the junction with Canadian Pacific. This is 12 miles, and the industries I'm modeling are, in fact, just a 6-mile stretch, as shown here outlined in red. Now, the faint yellow is showing the entire route. The initial layout, which we had in 1999, was in the basement of a townhouse, and it covered just the western sub itself. Uh, Now, with a bit more room, I've included now the Halton sub, which leads from the Macmillan Yard to a storage yard at Malport and to the junction where there's an exchange with Canadian Pacific. The Macmillan Yard was once the largest classification yard in Canada and in fact in North America. It's second now to the yard in Winnipeg. Uh, but in this yard, there is a 33 track section, which is reserved to industries in Toronto, in the city of Toronto. This is the general area of what's called the GTA, or the general area of Toronto. Union Station is a bit off here. And this, of course, is Lake Ontario. But we are modeling the late 1980s. And up until recently, there has been a lot of active industries on the Western Sub, but from as time goes on, industries move out of town or they turn to being served by truck rather than rail. But up until 1999, there was quite active industry. In fact, the Macmillan Yard section reserved for freight coming to this area referred to about 60 industries in the Toronto area. There's, of course, nothing like 60 now. Actually, in the present time, and uh, as of 2 years ago, there was just only one local served the industries here. So the model will be covering the Macmillan Yard, the Malport Yard, which is a storage yard for cars coming to the industries, and the interchange. And all three yards, the interchange is the Lambden Yard, all three of these yards are essential to operating the Western Sub in the rail world as well as on the layout. If we look at this is 1999 maps, and were training maps for training engineers on the commuter line. Uh, we see that there are a fair number of active industries being rail served. There are some, when you see the dash line, these have been discontinued, and the turnout coming from the service track has been spiked. The main track here now is a four-track main line used exclusively or almost exclusively for passenger. There's the Via line, and there is a commuter line, the Go train, and there is an express line from Union Station to Pearson International Airport. The industries that are served in this area, however, are served from service tracks. The four-track main line is under CTC control from Montreal. However, the service tracks are in yard limit territory. That is, no signaling. There are no signals, and one operates at 10 to 15 miles an hour, and being able to stop if there's an obstruction within one half of the visual distance. That's the definition of a yard track, which has nothing to do with yards, in fact. So, if we look at the industries that are being served, we'll see on the layout, for example, Bethridge Road, where there is a cement plant that we're modeling, Martin Grove Road, where there is two food industries that are being modeled. Now, as we head further east to the right towards Union Station, we see again there is another section, Etobicoke North, where there are again some more rail-served industries. And this map is from 1999. As we can see, there are still a fair number of industries that were being rail-served. And heading further east, for example, we see coming from the service track, there is a fairly large paper manufacturing plant, which at this time is called Facel, and it's changed names a few times. I think it's now Irving Tissue. We're modeling this on the layout. However, this facility is on the east side of the Western Sub, whereas on the layout, for convenience, it's actually on the west side of the layout. So, as again, we're not typically in that sense prototypical. There is a freelance aspect to this also. In 1999, when I first moved to Toronto, when I first started a layout in Toronto, uh, I designed an N-scale layout, and I had no idea of prototype. In fact, I'm not even sure knew the word prototype with respect to railway modeling. Um, I just wanted to make a good N-scale industrial switching layout, which I did. I laid the track. However, one night when I traced the tracks of the industries that were in the area, And I should mention that when I came to Toronto, I spent a few years just photographing trains around the neighborhood. And this is how I came across the Western Sub. Now, when I traced the Western Sub tracks, the industries that I was interested in, onto a road map, it suddenly struck me one night that the Western Sub would make a perfect fit to the tracks which I had already laid. And that started my interest in prototype modeling. I learned what it was to model a prototype. So I chose the Western Sub. And this is our first layout, which was in the basement of a townhouse, 8.5 feet wide and about 21 feet long. And it's typical of a newbie, my first layout, which is the tendency to, for a new builder of a layout, to cram every available space with tracks, as we can see here. Uh, I did adapt to the industries on the Western Sub, but with a lot more track than any railroad would provide for an industry. And over the years, I've learned a lot more about how things go in the rail world, in urban modeling, urban railroading, I should say. So, although we got in nine of the industries that were on the Western Sub onto the track, and the system worked very well. We had a good 14 years or more of having operating sessions. The system operated very well. Uh, in 2015, then we sold the townhouse and moved into a condominium. And so the layout I'll be talking about now begins from 2015. But first, we'll have a look at the prototype. From 1998 to about 2008, I had photographed the area. This is a photograph of the paper manufacturing plant from a distance, from a pedestrian walkway. And this shows the typical type of industries, small to medium industries and warehouses that is on that section, that 12-mile section of the Western Sub. As you can see, it's very informal. There's often a lot of brush overgrown. This entrance is not being served, obviously, by rail, but in the distance there are uh, some more tracks serving industries. And again, this is typical of the area. Flat, uh, small two-lane roads with no road markings, and typical warehouses of this type. And as I would go back and photograph each time, more and more of these tracks were disappearing, unfortunately. Again, typical of urban uh, railways. We have housing, small shops. And this is a track of Canadian Pacific leading into the distance where there's a large meat packing plant, St. Helens Meat Packing, which is one of the industries we modeled on the layout. This is a view again of the paper manufacturing plant. On the south service track, there are two leads that go into the building, and they're still being in use. One of the convenience things of having the Western Sub right there that I'm actually modeling is that I could go back and photograph for color of the foliage and so on, and any details. It was very handy. It was at hand. This is a shot of again, of the meat packing plant. This was a pleasant place for me to watch uh, cars coming across the roadway and flagging traffic to get the cars across to the meatpacking plant. And also, it was a pleasant place because right next door was McDonald's. And this is one of the four or five cement batch plants in Toronto. These batch plants use cement and various types of aggregate to make specific types of cement for distribution to local and distant industries. And again, on Bethridge Road, uh, this plant is one of the ones that are you'll find on the layout. Now, I must point out that I did not certainly build the layout on my own. Um, we've had from 1999 the first layout, which was in the townhouse, and then in 2015 we moved to the condominium. Bill O'Shea, for example, was one of our faithful group. He was an electronics wizard. I learned a lot from him about electronics, about circuits, about control of signals, and so on. Keith Martell, a fellow member of the Canadian Association of Railway Modelers, and more recently James Razor, who is an architect and did a lot of amazing buildings on the layout in N scale. Sorry, and Walter Grabowski, who's a recent member, who is one of our regular groups now, who is a wizard at doing big things with small N-scale locomotives, improving sound, lighting, and so on. This is Bill O'Shea, and who's no longer with us, and um, Keith Martell, who keeps me on uh, the right side by arguing. So when I decided to adopt the Weston sub for the layout and to get into prototype modeling, I arranged with the Toronto Research Library to provide me with these industrial directories. And these were were invaluable to researching the industries. Uh, these Scott's industrial directories have the by street address, have each industry that is on the Western Sub and describes their size, number of employees, type of product they produce, which and that gives you a good idea of when you're researching the industries, what sort of products they produce and what they uh, need to take in. And it gives you a good idea of the size of the various industries. And from this, I was chose originally nine, but now seven industries for the layout. In addition to that, I obtained 1980 and 1983 employee timetables, which were invaluable. The footnotes, for example, show here some of the typical aspects of urban railway modeling. For example, on Dixon Road, which is on the layout, uh, the police have to be used to control traffic if you're running a train across a street. Uh, Mention of the General Mills lead, which is on one of the industries on the layout, refers to locomotives not permitted inside of the building, and so on. And these footnotes were very useful. So we'll have a look at first at the layout. This is the layout from 2015 in the condominium. This shows you an example of the work of James Razor, the architect who was part of our group, who now lives in BC. He traveled on the Western Sub and took photographs of the exact items before he modeled them. For example, this fence and the buildings were based on photographs that he took on a train ride on the GO train, which covers the extent of the Western Sub. This is James when we were building the layout in 2015, doing some ballasting. And this is the unit that we bought. It was a 500 square foot unit, a studio, on the 16th floor of the building. As we enter here, we have the bathroom, kitchen. Uh, in the past, we used to serve hot meals on our Wednesdays. And the outline in color here shows the layout itself. And we have now about twice the size of the previous layout, and this is about 400 square feet of space occupied by the layout. It's roughly 25 by 17 at its greatest width. So this provides nice wide aisles. We have 5 foot and 4 foot wide aisles, which is convenient for operations, and a nice large area for as a crew rest area. I won't go too much in detail about the details of the layout, just the height, the 46 inches. It's an around the wall basically with the peninsula, and everything is within an easy reach as far as handling switching goes. It's code 55 track. We have 3 scale miles of main track from the Macmillan Yard to the Landon Yard. Turnouts, micro-engineering originally. I bought about 50 of them. Again, I had too many tracks there again. Uh, and they all turned out, or mostly of these turnouts turned out to be not in gauge. It turns out that the mold they were using was old and the stock rails were coming out too thick. So we installed them and we were having a lot of derailing. Um, the company offered to replace them, but they were already installed with the servos. So it was easier to spend about 15 months of slowly grinding away until they were engaged. And as they break, which microengineering tend to break, I replace them with Atlas Code 55 number 7 turnouts. Curvature is very reasonable for N scale, very generous curves. On all of the rolling stock, uh, we converted the couplers to be body-mounted couplers, and all metal wheels, replaced the wheels. And the cars are all weighed considerably more than the NMRA standards, so 40 grams per car, because in N scale they tend to track much better. Our control is by lens DCC. It's just one technical item that was new when we built the layout in 2015, and the system for operating the turnouts by Barrett Hill. Uh, this company has begun this system, which has now, there have been 2 recent repeats of the system. The nice thing about it is that the turnouts are controlled by switches which operate from the capacitance of your finger. So you just theoretically just brush your finger on them and they will change the direction. And this operates a servo, 9-gram servo, which can be programmed for its rate of movement and direction of movement. So you look at the map replaces is a copy of the map on the prototype. We have the Macmillan Yard, the section which is reserved for traffic going to the industries, the storage yard at Hal West, uh, where cars are stored until they are ready to be sent to the industries by the local freights. And the uh, junction, the CP yard, London yard, which is the junction, and this is where material leaves and comes on to the layout. We'll talk about this in a short while on the operating system that we use. But the 3 yards, the Macmillan, the Malport, and Lambton yards are all essential to the operation. I should point out also that there is no through traffic on the Weston sub, uh, not on the layout nor on the prototype. Uh, the only through traffic is the um, transport and not freight, passenger. So I'll just go back for a minute. And now, if we look at the tracks here, there are some items that are not prototypical, and these are the changes that I've been making over the 10 years or so of this layout, of this second version of the layout. For example, as Keith Martell pointed out, um, and as I learned, railroads in general don't have loops. The exception would be a loop of loading a coal train, for example, where you have a continuous movement of cars. But in general, uh, for example, on the Western Sub, there is no reversing loop as I have built in here. This I designed so that we could get in to serve trailing point industries. So you could a train could come in this direction for serving a trailing point here, or come in this direction to serve a trailing point. This is not the case in the real world. So we removed the turnout here, and this was done uh, simply by doing the equivalent of spiking the turnout. Uh, this portion of the moving rail of the point rail was soldered to the stock rail. The other one removed, and as you can see, that the turnout was just cut off here. So we have removed um, the reversing loop. Again here, this was the meat packing plant, and we had 8 tracks serving this, which is far from realistic for an industry of that size. The railways would not have put in 8 tracks because tracks cost money. They cost money in maintenance and they cost money in structure. And an industry of this size, as I've learned over time, would not be served by 8 tracks, nor would this industry, which was uh, a subsidiary of General Mills, uh, nor would it be served with 3 tracks. These are not necessary. So, as we can see in the meat packing plant, these 2 tracks were also a problem because they were facing point. And because of the lack of space in the track, you could only get in 2 cars at a time. It took up a lot of time unnecessary in switching. So these were removed and converted. The building was redone into a truck loading and unloading facility for the industry. We see in the back here, this is the administration building and laboratories for the industry. And we could see here the storage tanks, which we saw of the meatpacking plant. And one other thing is we provide some parking, which is often missing on layouts, parking for the industry. And again, this was the Lipton's plant, which was served with 3 tracks. 2 tracks were removed. Again, the 2 doors converted into truck unloading and parking. These buildings were all modeled after the exact photographs of the existing industry. So if we look at the present track plan, we've reduced the tracks from of these 2 industries from 8 to 4 tracks. And that's not all finished yet because I've recently removed this track as being unnecessary. So although I should point out, by removing tracks and removing turnouts, we're not removing any fun of operation because we're operating here at 10 miles an hour in a relaxed fashion and in a realistic fashion. We have re-rails to be removed before you go into an industry. We operate with with an engineer and a conductor, each with their own roles. So although we're removing track, we're not removing any of the fun of operating. In fact, it becomes more interesting and more realistic. So again, we have the Macmillan yard, the storage yard, and the exchange. There are still some, for example, the paper plant, I think, has one track too many. And there are sometimes some people object to removing track, but I think that's partly on the steps towards more of a prototype. So we'll have a quick look at the layout. This is the Macmillan yard. It's a classification yard. Cars are not stored here. They are classified into different tracks depending on which industry is going to be served by those cars. So this means that if when you're making up a train, you do not have to search the yard to find the tracks. You go to those tracks which are pertinent to the industry which you're going to serve, and the cars should be there. This yard also has some, if I can find that magnifying in here in the distance are engine facilities. We have repair in place facilities for locomotives, a building for the yard staff for the workers in the yard. And this is an arrival track, a departure track where trains are made up for outgoing, and the locomotive run around track for positioning locomotives on either end of the train. Again, the background buildings were done by James Razor. And we go to the storage yard. This storage yard is very similar to the actual map that is used for the job sheets that engineers have for working on the Weston Sub. I learned this because we had a recent visitor who was a locomotive engineer on the Weston Sub, and he had some of his job sheets with him. Uh, Interestingly, there is also on the job sheets, there is a scrapyard in the same vicinity, or within that actually, the Malport storage yard, and which is the scrapyard we have here. So we're crossing now across the window into the industrial area, starting with the Rexdale. And this is now in yard limits. So we're operating here at 10 miles an hour, 10 to 15 miles an hour. This is the paper manufacturing plant. Um, uh, one of the five industries that on the layout which have been modeled from photographs of the actual industries. The next industry is freelance in a way because it's not on the Western Sub. There is in Clarkson, which is not too far away, there is an actual petrochemical plant. This plant receives the occasional tank of crude oil and manufactures industrial solvents such as xylene and toluene and so on. I put that in because I like chemicals, just part of my background. These buildings represent uh, one of the many uh, mid-sized metal manufacturing plants, specialty plants that are on the Western Sub. And it's not a model of a specific one, but I did take this building from a building on the Western Sub. And actually, the building itself was a glass manufacturing building, but I used the same structure, the same door and type of metal sheathing. And we have also the large cement batch plant, which produces cement products of different types, cement structures also, and cement lined pipes. This is on Bethridge Road, and it is one of the industries that is actually on Waithe Road. And then we go around to Belfield Road, where we find the former Lipton's plant, these buildings, which where we removed the track into the meat packing plant, and again modeled after the exact plant. Bill O'Shea modeled the same cooling towers on the buildings. We have four doors here, two for frozen uh, meat and two for refrigeration. So the reefers are positioned on this track. And lastly, on the layout, this is a bulk transfer unit, Northwest Freight Transfer, which is the oldest of the rail-served industries on the Western Sub. Of course, it's much larger than what we've modeled here. We've modeled only a portion of it. And again, these the buildings, the details of James Waithe. And finally, what is crucial to the layout, and this is where goods leave the layout and come onto the layout. This is the Lambton Yard, which is exchanged with the CP junction. This has been correct. This should be CP, not CN. It's Canadian Pacific yard. And there are three tracks here. These numbered tracks are based on the two local industries that operate on the layout. Cars are put here, and 24 hours later, what is a load will become an empty, and what is an empty will become a load that is requested by an industry. So we move on to operations. And when we have guest operators, I send them a map of the layout. I send instructions, and I send separate instructions for the conductor. We operate always with one engineer and one conductor. The conductor has the paperwork, studies the paperwork, and plans the moves. The engineer operates the engine. And the main point is to get people to slow down, study what they want to do, take the time, and enjoy themselves. This photo is from 2014 from the first layout. So onto the program that we use to operate, which is a big part of what I see as prototypical, is functionally prototypical. The program, which was developed about 23 years ago, I would say, has two aspects. It has a program which operates the database and an ancillary program developed by Jean Piquet from Montreal. And this program is the balancer, which is a great aid in helping you to adjust your database. The principle of operation uh, is non-random. It's based on what is an industry needs and what they produce. So the job of setting it up, which takes time, but it's not complicated, is setting up the database. You have different car types, AAR car types, the products your industries produce and what they need. So this is part of the enjoyable part of it is studying those industries, studying, for example, a meat packing plant, finding out that they need, for example, nitrates so that the frankfurters look nice and red, or that they need tons of salt and tons of sugar. And they produce either canned goods or frozen goods or packaged goods. They need material for packaging, for example. So what one does for each industry, you study the industry, you learn how they work, and then you enter into the database the products that are needed and what is produced. And you control the activity by controlling the frequency of delivery how long it takes to, for example, to unload a car, and how long uh, does the car stay at that industry. Various aspects which I'll show in a short way. We'll show shortly how one controls the activity. The advantage of the system is that it is a realistic movement of products. Um, the movement of a car to an industry begins when an industry requests an empty car. And from that movement, the program itself takes over. It's automatic. And once you've set up your database and you've set up your industries, if you don't make any changes, for example, if you don't introduce a new industry or a new product, you can operate for years. The system remains balanced and it runs smoothly with no problem from one session to another. And all you have to do is print your switch list and the other paperwork. So we'll go on, have a look at some of the items. For example, you have your industries have the amount of space that you have on a given track or tracks for the industries. And in this way, it's part of the control of activity. The more space you have, the more you have activity of an industry. That is one of the determinants of activity. So we have the industries each listed, and we have their track space, the space for a number of cars for each industry and each yard. These numbers may not be the real amount. For example, the Macmillan yard can hold over 150 cars, but so that the yard is not overfilled and we're not driven to keep trying to get the yard half full, we limit the amount of activity by limiting the space as far as the program is concerned. This is a screenshot of the products part of the database. As you can see, for example, for the cement plant, we have products that are carried in cement hoppers or open hoppers, cement structures that are carried on flatbeds, and tank cars, tank chemicals in tank cars, and so on. These are all the use of the AAR is essential. That's how the program operates. And for example, wood chips are used in wood chip hoppers, a specific type of hopper. So you buy the kinds of products you need, and the program will tell you once you do the balancer, it'll tell you how many cars you need of each type. Now, this shows the database for shippers. You have, as for example, the cement plant, which is producing a cement structure that's carried in a flatbed. And as you can see here, the you can control the amount of product by the numbers that you have here. Okay. And notice that you have in the Lambden yard, in the exchange, these are virtual industries. For each product that is produced by an industry on the layout, there has to be a virtual industry that needs that product and requests the same amount. And that's where the balancer comes in. Because even for one item, it would be hard for us humans to keep in mind the balance of all of these products that are being used to make sure that there's a balance between what's being used, what's requested, and what's being used. And that's done by the software itself. If we look at consignees, that is, for example, the cement plant is getting uh, aggregate, for example. Aggregate has to be shipped from the virtual industry, which is in the Lambden yard. And notice the Lambden yard is uh, receiving the cement structures that are produced by the plant. So there's a balance between shipping and consignments that is controlled. And again, in the case of consignments, what you get, that is set by the number of empty cars than the industry requests. And as you can see in this column here, if we want a lot of activity, we want, for example, a lot of metal products to be received by the virtual industry, we request five empties instead of one. So one thing we do with the yard capacity is that we have two locals because to provide for uh, the number of industries we have, there's a limit on how many cars you can have in a train, for example. We limit it to 12 cars in a train. If you didn't have enough trains, you would be the last industries on the line would not get any activity because there'd be no space on the trains. So we balance it out by balancing the capacity of the two trains. So we have roughly a good balance between the two locals that serve the two different industries. I should mention that if there are any questions, at the end there may be time for questions. You can either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and pose the question. Um, this shows the switch list that's produced by the software. This is the A local, and it shows the timeline of delivery to different uh, industries on the layout. And what is important is after each local turn has gone to the industries, delivered products, picked up products, there is then an accompanying transfer line that runs from the Macmillan yard directly to the interchange, carrying those products or carrying those empty cars, and then bringing products back from the virtual industries. So there's a transfer run after each. So we have the two locals and their transfer runs. And these are, uh, this is a typical switch list to show you what is produced by the software. And this is what the conductor gets. The conductor gets an identification of the car type, whether it's empty or a load, and where it's going. For example, cars going from the Macmillan yard for this cement plant, going from Macmillan to the cement plant carrying products. Once it gets to the cement plant, it's going to be picking up cars and bringing them back. So this is a switch list for the B local, which serves the cement plant, serves the metal manufacturer, and serves the petrochemical plant, for example. And for each train that comes back, here's the local 570, which is one of the locals, and we use the same number and letter designation as is used on the prototype for a local train. When trains return to the yard crew, which is often the same crew that operates the locals, or if you have a separate dispatcher, the yard crew will see that the car that has come in from the cement plant uh, carrying a product is going to be put into a car in the classification yard for for the cement plant. So this yard arrival list allows one to classify the cars according to their next destination. And on the fascia of the Macmillan yard, we see that cars going into the cement plant or to the bulk transfer unit go onto track 5. So when you're making up a train for these industries to carry material, you'll find them on track 5. So there's no cherry picking of the yard necessary. And in conclusion, I just want to point out that over the years, I've learned a lot about the railroads and how they operate from the internet. There's been a lot more information than there used to be. on the internet, and especially this video by DJ's Trains. This is a man who's had 26 years experience. He's still operating as a CSX operator on an industry, but he also is licensed Zoom, not Zoom, um, uh, thing with rotors, is operating um, a drone, a drone operator. And he's shown some very good photos of industries, tracks, how the tracks look, how many tracks they have for a given industry. And I've learned a lot about how the railroad operates from that. And also there are iOS groups, a group such as the Operation Special Interest Group, for example. When I had a question of would a conductor hang on to the back of a train for a movement of 20 kilometers, for example, I could pose this on the internet and I got back answers from experienced real life conductors. So there's a lot of material out there now that there wasn't in the past, which has helped to approach the prototype. Thank you for your attention. I'll turn it over now to you, Malcolm, if there are any questions.
Okay, Willie,
Uh,
thank you very much for
okay.
this. Um, oh, there's some construction
Oh no,
progress.
let me shut off.
You should tell them about
Okay.
your spanning the big window there.
Oh yes, yes. Because it's a condominium, there are regulations about the windows. So what we did was we built to have it here. Uh, we arranged a causeway using some steel um, joists, which are used in building walls, to make a box structure, and then had a wooden structure on top to carry the tracks, but done with only one by 1 inch support. Sorry, which coincided with the window frame, so would not be too bulky and too obvious in the window. So it was fun building that. Yes. And it's very sturdy, and it's braced on the bottom to the baseboard.
Yeah,
Yes, uh-huh.
yeah, it's beautiful. I've had the pleasure of operating on this layout a few times now with Willie and his compatriots, and it really does operate beautifully. It's a pleasure to operate, and we always do have a really good time operating the layout prototypically. And in Engage, I was a bit mystified at first, but through the years, Willie and his gang have learned how to get these engaged locomotives and equipment to operate very, very well. So the layout is an actual, it's a real pleasure to operate it. And if you're ever interested, I'm sure if you get in touch with Willie, um, you'll get a firm invitation to come down and operate sometime. He's always open to people coming in. So we really appreciate that, Willie.
Thank you.
So thank you. If you do have questions for Willie, you can forward them directly to him or to me. Because this is going to be a recording, of course, there won't be live questions and answers, but we hope you enjoy the presentation. And thank you very much for looking at it.
Good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Willie.
Okay. Bye. Good
All
night.
right, good night.